Okay, today's video is going to be a little different. I created a PDF based on a project that my uncle worked on, and now this is his idea. But I did want to show you what is possible with silicone RTV. So the problem that he was having was he was having a problem finding a brake bellows. This is the brake bellows right down here that I'm highlighting with my cursor. It's for a 63 Corvette, as you can see in this PDF. Now the PDF, just so you know, the PDF is going to be available on Google Drive so that you can download it with, there's going to be a link in the description so you can download the entire PDF so you have a working copy of exactly what I'm kind of going through today. I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm just going to highlight it and give you an idea of what's possible with this black silicone. I told him when we got talking about it, he'd really picked a interesting article or project to work on because, as you can see with this bellows, it's very thin wall and has these undulations so that it can move back and forth and not fatigue. So he's picked out a really tough one, and this would have been a great test to see whether or not this procedure would actually work. So we tossed around some ideas, and this is his procedure, what he came up with. So this is his idea, not my idea, and I just wanted to highlight this because he did a really great job. So this is how he made it. What he did was he drilled a hole lengthwise through the piece of UHMW and then placed a threaded rod through the center. He chucked that into his lathe, as you can see here in this picture. I'll zoom in on some of these just to be able to show you kind of a little bit more about what it is. You can see that the threaded rod here is chucked into the jaws of the lathe. Now what he's done is he's turned it and matched the outside diameter and the undulations to the original part that he had as a template. So once he created the mandrel, he was going to make a female mold from the mandrel. So if you scroll down through the PDF, I talk about how he created the mold. What he ended up with was he took 2 blocks of wood. You can see the wooden blocks down here. He created 2 blocks of wood and bolted them together and then drilled a hole lengthwise through the block, because what he was going to do is fill that void with Bondo. Now in this photo here, it shows it a little bit better. You can see the blocks of wood, the hole that he drilled through the entire block. Like the procedure says, you bolt the blocks together and then drill the hole so that your split line on both sides of the mold is in the very center of the hole. So that's explained in the procedure. So I just wanted to show you that. After creating the mandrel, which is this piece, he also created 2 of these yellow index discs. So the index disc will align it inside the mold as well as center it inside the mold, as well as give you an idea when you're creating each half of the mold where everything is indexed from. And the procedure, like I say, shows that exactly how to do it. So then he mixed up the Bondo and he was going to make one mold half at a time. Mixed up his Bondo, placed it in the bottom of the mold, pressed in the mandrel that he'd machined, and used that index block, which again, if you look at this photo here, he's aligned this index block right up with the edge of the mold so that he knows exactly where it's placed in the mold. So he's pressed it down into the into the Bondo, and it's made an impression. Any excess Bondo that is squirted out up the sides or out the ends, he's just trimmed off and sanded later. Then he made another one exactly the same on the opposite block. And then again, by aligning this face with the other block, and because the blocks are indexed by the holes, he could be assured that each half of the mold is going to be indexed relative to the opposite side. So once that was done, he removed the mandrel, put it back on the lathe, and he reduced the overall diameter of it by 1/16 of an inch. That gives him the wall thickness. So if you zoom in on this, you can see a very small line along here. That is going to get filled up with silicone. all the way around here. So again, his index blocks are still centering the now smaller mandrel in the hole, perfectly centering it, perfectly indexing it end to end. Once it has been, the overall diameter of the mandrel has been reduced, the mold needs to be covered with a parting compound. Now, as I explained here in the PDF, the Bondo or silicone will not stick to the plastic, which is great, but the silicone could stick to the Bondo. So what you need to do is to put a light coat of paste wax on all the surfaces that could be touched by the silicone, which includes the wooden side pieces. Because when you put this thing together, you're going to get excess silicone squirting out the split line as well as the ends. The procedure talks about drilling holes in each side of these end blocks, these index blocks, so that any kind of silicone excess that's inside the mold is going to squirt out through here. And we'll show you that in another picture just coming up here. So once that's all done and it's the mold has been prepped, he took a certain amount, like this is a bit of trial and error to get this amount, but he's got his amount and he's worked it under the soapy water for about 4 minutes. He laid the silicone down onto a wetted surface and he rolled out a long cigar-shaped rod, and it was about twice as long as the entire mold. Now all he's got to do, rather than having to roll out 2 individual rods, he can actually just roll out one long one, cut it in half. He laid one of the rods all the way along the bottom of the mold. He took the mandrel, pressed the mandrel down on top of the silicone, and what it does now is it moves the silicone up the walls on each side to the very top of this split line, thereby keeping out any air bubbles that could get trapped if you just simply close the mold. Then, once that was done, he took the piece, not the other piece of silicone rod, laid it down in the opposite side, and then as long as it is sticking well to your mold, you can do it this way. If it's not sticking well to your mold, then lay it right on top of the mandrel, because you're going to have to flip the one over and press it, the second half of the mold, you have to press it down on top of the first mold. So if you found that when you flipped it over, your silicone rod fell off, you're going to have a different way of making sure that it stays in place. So you might end up having to place the rod on top of the silicone, or on top of the mandrel, rather than leave it right in the mold and risk it falling off when you flip the mold upside down to close the mold. So once he did that, he closed the mold, and I'll zoom in on here, and you notice that he's getting silicone squeezing out those relief holes that were drilled out in the end pieces. So that's awesome. He also mentioned that he was getting silicone squeezing out the part line, and that's an awesome thing because that tells you that the mold is full, as well as it's pushed air out, and you're probably going to end up with a really nice part. So that is a great thing to see. As well, it talks about this in the procedure. So that's a good sign. Okay, so he left the mold then for 24 hours and then removed the mandrel with the part now on the mandrel. So you can see the part here. Now, one thing I want to tell you here is that if you notice, silicone is awesome at matching exactly any lines in your mold or on your part. It will duplicate them perfectly. So it's up to you as to how good your finished product is going to be based on how good your mold is. Just be aware of that. If you're not concerned about being perfectly aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't matter. In this case, you'll see a few little lines here, which is just fine. The part looks awesome as far as I'm concerned. So once it cures, you can trim off the flashing It'll be cured when you take it out of the mold after 24 hours. Trimmed off the flashing, and here is the finished part. On the left is the finished part, and on the right is the original. You can see where it has failed and broken in a few places here, especially down this area it's failed. This is the new silicone portion right here. Did a beautiful job. It came out really well. And then the other side is this photo here is the silicone piece, the Bellows, put onto the brake booster. Now, he mentioned that this white that you're seeing through these holes is actually a felt disc that had to be cut and placed in there. What it does is it stops dirty air from getting inside the bellows. It's just a little bit of an air filter that's on there. So that's essentially the idea, and he did a beautiful job on it. It came out really, really well. What I do want to mention is at the very bottom here as well, please remember that if you have any small imperfections in the finished part, you can patch those imperfections with more raw silicone. Fresh silicone will bond to your cured part, so it may not be as aesthetically pleasing as a perfect part, but if you're not really concerned about being perfectly aesthetically pleasing, you can repair a part. As well, you can bond parts together. So if you took two pieces, say two tubes, that needed to be attached right angles to one another, once the two pieces come out of their or off their molds, whichever the case may be, you can actually bond them together using more raw silicone at that juncture. So I really hope this tutorial, like I say, ignites your imagination, and hopefully it can fix, or help with a project that you are currently interested in working on. So anyways, thanks for watching today, and hope this helps. And like I say, please hit that subscribe button and press the like button. It really helps me to make more of these videos, and I sure enjoy doing them for you. Thanks so much.